We're going to go back into our text, which is Matthew chapter 6, 9 through 13, and we're continuing in our sermon series in prayer. I really hope that you guys are not just listening to lessons about prayer, but are practicing it at home. And let me just read to you guys Matthew chapter 6, 9 through 13, and then I'm going to ask if you guys can recite it after me as well. Pray then like this: Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Will you repeat this after me? We'll start from our Father.
Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. And forgive us our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil.
And we're going to be repeating this every week for the next, I think, several weeks. But let's join with me in prayer. Dear God, we just want to thank you just for another year, Lord, that you have blessed us with and gifted us to. And Lord, as we enter into 2019, Lord, may we be able to commit it to you, having you at the center of our lives, Lord. And I pray, Lord, that your hands may be upon us. May your blessings flow onto us. May your protection be over us. And Lord, I just pray that with that, Lord, we may come back and praise your name and really be able to live out our calling as children of God and all that you have called us to do. And Lord, I just pray that you may be with our sermon this morning as we learn what it means to call you our Father. And may that really be planted deep within our hearts, O Lord, and may it change everything we do in our lives, as well as how we approach you in our prayers. Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be holy and pleasing to you. I pray that your gospel may be preached and your spirit may work in our hearts. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Last week we did start a new sermon series called Prayer, and yesterday we kicked off kind of our prayer meeting just to come together to fill out different prayer commitment cards. And the reason why I felt moved to do this series is I think most of us, we realize that we should pray. We know that it's good to pray. We often tell people that we're praying for them. And every time a tragedy happens in our world or in our country or something, everybody's really quick to be like, we're praying or we're doing something. People change their Facebook page, their profile pictures to show that they're praying. But have you guys ever really thought about what it means to pray? I mean, what does it mean to do it? And it might be the case that we never really thought about it deeply, or maybe you have, or maybe you know what you're doing when you come to it. But oftentimes it's just like you come to prayer when you know you have to pray for something, right? Or when you're desperate for something, or when someone requests you for something. See, I think sometimes we struggle with prayer, at least doing it continually, because oftentimes we define prayer in a certain way. We define it as simply asking for things. So, we come to God and we ask for certain things to happen in our lives, or if someone makes a request, or if something really is going bad in our life, and we come to him in this type of way. We ask for God's blessings or protection or provision, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I'm almost certain that 90% of us think that's the only purpose of prayer. So if we think about praying in this way, and we don't have any immediate needs or any pressing matters, we don't even think about praying. I mean, what's the point? Like, sometimes we share burdens, like, I've got nothing going on in my life. Things are so good, I don't need prayer. There's no tragedy in my life. What's the point? We only think about it in that one type of way. And oftentimes that definition of prayer, which is certainly a part of prayer, often becomes a barrier. In fact, what Jesus is actually in our text is saying that praying is so much more than that. More than that. In fact, when you look at the structure of prayer, of how he teaches us to pray, he starts from telling us to think about God, to preach all those words of God, the promises of God onto our lives, to see who he is, and then let it flow into our needs. We usually start with our needs, and then maybe we think about God, or maybe we just stop with our needs. I know I often do this. I have a list of things I want to pray about. I go through that list, and I say, thank you, amen, and it ends. But what Jesus is saying is, in order to experience the full benefits of prayer, Christ says, start with recognizing who you're talking to. He says we need to praise him first. We need to acknowledge him first. We're to remember and understand that relationship first, because that becomes the basis of our prayer. That's where power and confidence comes from. I mean, it really is a foundation. We can have a beautiful, deep, disciplined, and consistent prayer life. I mean, beautiful. You're singing songs like stuff. You're getting to that moment. If it doesn't have that foundation of who you're praying to, then it's really no different than someone who talks to oneself to make them feel better. I mean, think about it. Today's sermon is building off of last week's, where we spent a handful of time talking about ways we shouldn't pray. And today's kind of like the part 2, where we're really focusing on the way we should pray. So last week we talked about how we shouldn't pray. One, we shouldn't pray as a hypocrite. This is how some religious people pray. This is the type of prayer where we display our spirituality, kind of like, I want to show the world I care. I'm a good person, so I'm going to pray out in public. I'm going to post it, but not really pray. He says, don't do it that way. And he says, 2, don't pray like an orphan. And praying like an orphan, it sounds kind of holy. You come to God like religiously. You pray, you ask for things like 100 times over, saying, I'm going to pray, I'm going to pray, I'm going to pray. And it's almost like you're begging God for a handout. And Christ was like, no, praying is not a begging moment. In fact, the God that you're praying to already knows what you're praying for or what you're going to say before you say it. And a lot of times, today is so important to understand who you're praying to, and that changes the way you come to God. I mean, a lot of times we love to talk about prayer, we love to talk about the benefits, but the key component with all of it is who you're praying to. Today's text is really just one line. So easy. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. But in that one phrase, there's so much history, there's so much purpose, there's so much meaning. And that one phrase actually sets up the rest of the prayer. And like I said, it's the foundation. It changes everything. Now, you guys really think about what prayer is. We last week we talked about how it's 2 people coming together in conversation, in dialogue, and it's an encounter. It's a meeting process. But let me ask you guys, every time you meet a person, what makes that encounter, what makes it meaningful? Why is that encounter so good? I mean, just think about for a moment. Not all meetings or encounters are the same, right? I mean, it's very different. It's different in how you talk to your husband or your wife versus how you talk to your coworker. The feeling's going to be different. The tone's probably going to be different. It could be better or worse, I don't know. Or how about how you talk to your close friends versus the way you talk to your in-laws? Very different. Or how about a stranger that you meet on the road versus your brother that you knew your whole life? Those encounters are totally different. And maybe if you're an extrovert, and I met some of these guys that just love talking and they don't really care about who they're talking to or who's listening, then it's all the same for them. But for most people, those conversations, the content, the tone, the feeling, the likability of that moment is totally different. I don't mind chatting with my friends all day long. Well, maybe I'm not a guy with that much words. But you put me in a room with my in-laws, I don't say a single word. When you're with your friends, time goes by and you're like, oh my gosh, it's already midnight. You got to go home. But with your in-laws, you're staring at the clock like, my honey, when we're going to go, what's going on? There's something very foundational that changes that encounter totally. And this is what I think Jesus is pointing to. So practically speaking, there's 2 foundations that I think Christ is pointing to that changes the encounter of prayer. One is the type of relationship you have, and 2 is the type of person you're talking to. And those 2 things really just changes everything completely. And we're going to talk about why. I mean, relationships is what it sounds like, right? What type of relationship is it? How are you affiliated? And the person is who they actually are. What is their character? Are they trustworthy? What can they do? What type of profession do they have? What have they done in the past? What is it about their person that you can actually approach them? So there's 2 things. Focus first on the relationship. See, when Jesus teaches us to pray, he first says, pray then like this, our Father in heaven. To us, this phrase doesn't sound that amazing, especially if you kind of grew up in kind of a Christian atmosphere or even in America. Referring to God as a Father is not like a crazy thing. Like you've heard it, you've heard the Lord's Prayer, you've heard it all. But back then, in Christ Jesus' time, even in the Jewish community, and across even all religious forms, this was like a total surprise when Christ said, pray like this. It almost sounded blasphemous. They're like, can you really call God our Father? I mean, see, the word Father is also used in the Old Testament, but it's only used about 14 times. 14 times, but it's always in reference to, like, the God of Israel, the Father of Israel, kind of in a more national sense, or like the God of the cosmos, more in a kind of a distant, kind of all-encompassing thing. But Jesus, just alone in the gospel, says Father to God more than 60 times in just 4 gospels. And it's not even Jesus saying Father in a real formal sense, like, oh, Father in heaven. But a lot of times he says it in a very different way. In fact, the Bible even uses an Aramaic word used by common folk. They hadn't even throw that in there, even amongst all the Greek, because they knew how significant that word was. And that was Abba, Father. And I really like this word because, I mean, in a Korean sense, I grew up, in a Korean background, and we say Appa, and, that's kind of a Bulgarian type of term. Say Appa, Abba, and I was like, yeah, this is great. But that word in and of itself explains a type of relationship. It's a word that children use to address their father. It's kind of like the word daddy, like daddy this. It's the closest thing that we can think of in the translation. But tell me not daddy has a tremendously different nuance than father. Sure, father describes the affiliation, but daddy describes the affinity. I mean, a son, no matter how messed up the relationship with their father is, they'll be like, all right, yeah, he's my father. But I doubt that he would ever say, yeah, that's my dad. I mean, even as grown adults, we don't say daddy. Well, if you are, like, don't do it. You sound kind of weird. But you got to realize that Jesus just redefined our relationship with God completely. It was never, ever, no one ever referred to God in this type of way. And it was a completely new development in prayer history. There's no record of anybody calling God Father. Now, if you take any other religion that prays, they do not address God in this way, unless they're influenced by Christianity. And I say this with confidence. I mean, you ask any Buddhist of their idea of God. Their idea of God is never personal. In fact, like pure Buddhists would say, no, there is no real God. There's a cosmic force somewhere in the world that holds things together. That's why most people will be like, hey, Buddhism, more than a religion, is more of a philosophy of life. And prayer is more of a form of meditation to separate oneself from their suffering. And, they kind of do this, and they kind of pray to cosmic forces. And I know there's a lot of different sects within Buddhism now that kind of mix in different religions. But in its current sense, it's not. They don't talk to a God. You ask any Muslim and how they address God, they pray actually more than any of us would probably ever. They're actually required to pray 5 times a day. And if you're kind of an Orthodox Muslim, they'll say you're not a follower unless you do this all the time, every day. But if you ask them if they refer to God as Father, not only will they be confused in that expression, they would be like, yo, that's a blasphemous approach. For them, God is not at the level where you can have a relationship with him. In fact, the whole Trinity, right? Father, Son, Holy Spirit, that formulation is a complete abomination. They're like, no way. And even back in Jesus' time, even to traditional Greeks, God was recognized to be logos and reason, the force behind everything. But never was he a personal God. Never was he somebody that you could have a relationship with, let alone be a father, and him being a father to us. But here Jesus Christ comes in saying, pray to God, saying, our Father. Our Father. Personal. Constantly having conversations or talking to him. And not even in a formal sense, but even saying daddy. He's 33-year-old and he's saying daddy, And when Jesus invites us to pray in this manner, saying our Father, he's not saying, I'm setting a good example of the Son. But in that one thing, he's actually inviting us to change our status, asking us to join the family, saying this is what it means to come into prayers, to become a child of God. And in that being a part of the family, you have the privilege to talk to the Father. This is why this address is so important. It defines why and how we approach God. 1 John 1:12 and also Galatians 4:6, it says this. But all who did receive him, who believe in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. And because you are sons, God has sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, crying, Abba, Father. Guys, you guys realize this. It's only in Christ, the Son of God, that we're given the gift of being daughters and sons of the living God. And once you become a child of God, it's the Holy Spirit that enables you to call him Abba. Abba. I mean, Jesus is telling us, he's talking to his disciples. He's saying, repeat after me, saying, our Father. Let me ask you guys, how do you approach God? How do you approach God in your moment of prayer? How do you pray to him? I mean, you're in his house right now, right? We say church is the house of God. You come to church, you pray probably time to time, hopefully more than what you do just at church. But what type of relationship do you have with him? When Jesus talked about praying like a hypocrite or praying like an orphan, he was doing that to contrast a certain type of prayer or a certain type of approach. He's saying there's basically two different approaches that you can come to God with. One is you're either a child of God and you come to him in that way, or you're not. You're either a child of God or you're not. And the approach that you come into prayer changes everything. Paul Miller, a Christian author, said this: how we approach God in prayer is where we demonstrate whether we really understand the gospel. Whether we really understand the gospel. Tim Keller, a well-known pastor in New York, drew this analogy, and I thought it was great. And he explains that most relationships in the world often kind of function in two different types of ways, right? And maybe you guys can agree, maybe there's more, maybe there's a spectrum, I'm not sure. But either you approach somebody in a business type of way or in a family type of way. See, when you're approaching somebody in a business type of way, the basis of that encounter is, hey, I have something for you. Give and take. Got something for you. But in a family type of relationship, the basis is totally different. It's what I am to you. It's not what I have something for you or what I have for you. It's what I am to you. See, in a business relationship, the basis is performance. You perform for me, I perform for you. In a family relationship, it's different. It's commitment. It's kind of permanent. It's a committed relationship. And the way you can kind of see a different distinction is in the moment of prayer, are you coming into his house like a boarder or like a tenant, or are you coming as a person in the family? And let's think about that for a moment. You can live in someone's house in two different types of ways. One is the landlord-tenant relationship. You're renting a room or something, and the relationship can be pretty good as long as you pay the rent, as long as you keep the rules, you keep things tidy, you clean up after yourself, you don't leave your underwear in the bathroom. As long as you keep all of that, then the relationship was good. It can be calculated. And generally speaking, most homeowners, they say that if you have a tenant, don't get too close. You don't want to mix that in. They don't pay rent. You're in a weird, awkward position. You got to keep it far. But a family one is very different. It's unconditional. See, business is based on what you perform to merit, but the family one is not really about what you do, but it's more about who you are. Who you are. It's not doing, it's being. Now, it's not to say that if someone's living at your house and they're your son, they can do whatever they want. They can leave their underwear everywhere. They can do whatever they want, and they can get away with it. No, that's not the point. It's not that they can take advantage of it, but there's a very big difference. One says if you perform, then you'll be accepted. You'll be allowed to stay. But the other says, hey, since you're accepted, since you're a part of the family, you should be doing this. Very different approach. Very different approach. But it changes everything about prayer. I think many of us, including myself, and I was meditating on this all week. I think we do have a business type of way of coming to God. We do, you have a certain amount of diligence, like you go on your quiet time, you feel like you did good, you're like, oh, I can come to God in prayer, and I can feel good about it. Like, I've done my dues. And I'm not rebuking you guys for this, like I had a huge realization. But when we approach God in this outside of the family type of context, there's typically two different types of feelings that you can feel. One is anger, and another is anxiety. See, anger, we get angry when we pay our dues, and we feel like we did everything right. Like, we've done everything, but we don't get what we deserve. We get mad. We're like, yeah, what's up? I paid for it all. God, I served your church. I'm part of the children's ministry. That's not easy. Like, you can't throw me whatever you're throwing at my life right now. We get mad. Or the second is we get anxious, and I feel like I fall into this category a little bit more. We start to wonder, did I do everything right? Did I pay my rent on time? Oh my gosh, do I have a late fee? Did I break the rule? Am I going to get evicted? What's going to happen? I don't know. Then we come to God, we kind of confused, kind of anxious. We're like, oh man, God, I haven't come to you forever. Like, oh, please don't strike me down with lightning. And you come to him all kind of worried and scared. You're like, what am I going to do? But it's different in a family relationship. I mean, you can have frustrations, you can even have fights, but you never doubt at home. You don't doubt the relationship, it's set. But let me ask you guys, how do you address God? Do you call him Father in your prayer? I want to ask you guys, try this out, man. It's a real awkward experience. Like, I tried it out all week, and it for me, at least, I say dear God or dear Lord more than I say our Father, and I had to constantly try to change what I was saying, but it felt so weird. And I even tried the daddy thing, and I got like shivers on myself. Like really, I tried to try it, and like I don't know how you pray. Maybe you say Our Father because you memorize the Lord's Prayer a lot of times, but you never really thought about what it meant to be Father. Try Daddy. It throws a huge thing in there. It really does. But I kid you not. I mean, that moment it felt so weird, you know, and it sounds so formal. I mean, but it's coming to God in that way. You know what? It made me realize a few things, and maybe this is just a personal reflection. One, I realized that I was approaching God more in a cosmic sense, a God that let me live in this world, so I'm going to do what I can. Most definitely, there's moments where I felt like I'm a son, but I came with a lot of anxieties. That's one realization. But another realization I came to is this. I realized maybe this might be for most of you guys. You can call him Father, but you might not know what it means to have a father. You might not know. And I feel like it's a handful of people in this room, whether it's because you didn't have a father at home or just because, fathers on earth, and I look at myself and like, I suck as a dad, and this mostly the case. I mean, we're not perfect. But we have a skewed view of God just because how we've encountered fathers in our own life. And I was like, and for most of you guys, maybe you guys know that I didn't grow up with a father. My dad was sick when I was 6, and he died when I was 10. So I never really knew what it meant to call someone dad in a mature sense, And I realized, like, just in my own life and how I function, I hate asking for help. Like, I'll do things all by myself, and maybe it's because I didn't really know what it meant to ask for guidance, and I just figured things out. That's why I'm always confused when people ask me for things. I'm like, just Google it, man. But I realized this word is not special. I think all of us have skewed views of God in some way, maybe shaped by our own relationships in our world right now, because of our own past. The relationship with our fathers on earth can definitely influence how you view God. I mean, really think about it. It really does. And it can be good or bad. You can have a very endearing feeling about God, feel comfortable in His presence, or it can just feel a little bit awkward, like, I don't know what to do with it. I know you are, but I don't know what to do with it. And then, I thought about it deeply. God actually created fathers on earth to reflect our Father in heaven. We saw this in Ephesians chapter 5. We're called to reflect His nature. But when that reflection is not done well, I realize fathers can be very bad representatives. And I just want to focus on this just a little bit. Because it breaks my heart. I got interested in this, and I was like, all right, what is a father's influence in someone's life? And then as I looked those things up, like, most experts are saying we're increasingly becoming a community or in a culture where fathers really don't play a big role anymore. In fact, they said there's a crisis in America. According to some statistics, it says there are more than one in 4 kids they live without a father, and even within the other 3 to 4%, like research shows that a lot of them are not that involved in the life. But there's so much research talking about how a father plays such a huge role in the development of a child growing up in so many different ways. I mean, you ask any psychologist that really knows this stuff, they'll say the same thing. But on top of that, you know what I didn't realize? The influence of spirituality. There's some data that was collected by Promise Keepers and Baptist Press, and they had some interesting things. And sometimes I question these numbers because I'm like, wow, really? But I'm just going to read them off to you. If they're wrong, I'm sorry, but it shows something. But he says this: if a father does not go to church, even if the wife does, only 1 in 50 will become regular worshipers. If a father does go regularly, regardless of what the mother does, they say between 2/3 and 3/4 of children will attend church as adults. Sounds drastic. So, I didn't want to just trust that, so I read something else. I was like, there's got to be more stuff on it. So I read another survey that said this: if the first person in the household to become a Christian is a child, then there's about 3.5 probability that everybody else in the household will, come to faith. They say if a mother is the first person to become a Christian, there's about 17% probability that everyone else will follow her faith. However, they say when the father is first, there's a 93% probability that everyone else in the household will follow. And I was like, but as I realized, I'm a skeptic by nature. I'm like, let me see those numbers. Like, where did they get that? Like, what is a group? What is a group study and all that? You know, but the more I thought about it, I was like, but it makes sense. It shows an astonishing role of what a father's influence is on a child's life, not only in this life, but in the life to come after. And if earthly fathers, finite men with a lot of flaws, have this type of influence, I can only begin to imagine what the influence of a heavenly Father has on the life of a person. I mean, think about it. An infinite Father, infinite heavenly Father. What that has on the life of a person, the influence that has on a person. And I think this means something for us in a few different ways. One, if you're a father, you have a God-given responsibility, and much of what you do will not only influence the kids in your life right now or your family right now, but it's also going to influence them for eternity. But two, if your earthly father wasn't a person you could rely on, if he wasn't there, it's not a game over. Know that Jesus is telling you that you have been adopted into another family. And this gets us connected to a heavenly Father, a person that covers up all the flaws of our earthly Father. And this goes to our next point. Not only is the relationship important, the person is really important. See, a relationship is not, the relationship we have is not just with anyone. You're not just calling anyone Father. It's with an Almighty God and Heavenly Father, a perfect one. I mean, check this out. When we say heaven, it's talking about a renewed or redeemed or healed type of form of a thing that we find in this world. See, heaven is a perfected world, a world back to what it was meant to be when it was first created. Therefore, a Father in heaven, we're talking about a Father who is a perfect, redeemed form of whatever Father we find on earth. He's a good Father. And he says we're adopted into his family. You know, in this world, every relationship we have, it functions on these two things: a relationship and the type of person you have a relationship with. And not all fathers are equal. Not all fathers are equal. This is how it is. You know, one of my mentors, when teaching me about the type of pastor I should be, he I was a young guy, about 20-something. He was like, hey, there's two spectrums of pastoring I want you to keep in mind. And he made the analogy with the types of fathers there are. He says, there are some fathers who are great with their relationship with their children. Their kids love them. They just love being around them. They adore him. But sometimes that father lacks the ability to actually provide for their family. He doesn't really give them direction. Therefore, they can't really depend on him. They love him. But the children are always worried about their home situation. They're worried about where they're going to live, if they're going to have enough food. You know, and they constantly kind of live in this kind of anxiety state. And sometimes when they grow older, they feel like they have to now take care of their fathers and need to work. Of course, that happens naturally with age as well. But he can contrast that with fathers who may not be that good with their families in a relational sense, but are excellent providers. They know what they're doing. They know how to make a living. They make sure that their family has all that they need, but they lack intimacy. And he was like, hey, you know, and Pastor Earl, I think about both things. They both have to come together somehow. You got to constantly balance those things. You know, but I see this working in all relationships that we have. Isn't it true? There are some friends that you really, really love, and you love hanging out with them, but you will never go to them for certain advice. Just won't. You know, they'll tell you something stupid like, you know, just go drink, you know, or something like that. Like it's not going to help you. There's some certain family members that you love with all of your heart. You rely on them, but you can't come to them for certain things. You know, this is why I think it's so important that when Christ was saying this one line, he said, our Father in heaven, he defines the relationship, but then he goes to the next one and says, hallowed be your name, because the next part is so important as well. See, hallowed is a very strong word. Hallowed means holy, set apart. There's no one like it. It's pure. It's different from all this world. Hallowed literally means out of this world, much better. He said, you're a Father that's out of this world, so much better, set apart, something that you can't find in this world. And when we say, hallowed be your name, we have to recognize the weight of what name means. See, back in the Bible, back in the Old Testament, names are very, very serious. These days, we hear a cool name and it sounds cool. We're like, all right, we're going to name our kids that. Like, it's kind of like that. So, I chose Sophie instead of Sophia. Sophie sounds cooler. But back then, the Bible gave names to people that would reflect the essence of their divine calling. It wasn't a label, it was actually their identity. People didn't just give names, they were their names. And when we recognize that God's name is holy, We're not giving it worth somehow by what we're doing. We're not like giving God holiness, or we're simply recognizing his essence for what he is. And guys, this moment is so important for prayer because who you're talking to changes everything. Changes everything. And in this one phrase, we're acknowledging him for all the attributes and characteristics that he has. In his name, we see justice, love, his might. In his name, we see an omnipotent God, an omniscient God, a God that's everywhere. And this is the person we have a relationship with. You know, I'm just going to share with you guys just a few names that are written in Scripture. I hope I don't butcher these. These are Hebrew words. But Elohim, God is Elohim. He is your creator. My gosh, this starts from Genesis 1:1. God created everything. He created you. He created you special in his image. He created you valuable. I mean, all of this is just planted in the word Elohim. God is your creator. And there's Elohim Shalem. God is a living God. This means he's not a deadbeat God, but he's not an absent God, but he's there. He's with you. God of the living. And then there's Abba that we learned. God is your father. He's your daddy. And then there's Jehovah Jireh. God will provide. Saying that he has the ability to provide and he's there to provide for you. There's Jehovah Shalom. The Lord is peace. The peace that comes upon your heart, regardless of what you're going through, whether it goes up and down. Our emotions are kind of like waves. There's El Elyon. God is your sovereign. God is your sovereign. The Most High God. He has everything in his hand. There's El Panan, the jealous God. And this kind of sounds negative. You're like, oh, jealous God. What is this? But this means he's going to fight for you. He's going to hate things that will hurt you. He's going to ward off those that might prey on you. He's a jealous God. El Roy, he sees you. We see this when he's talking to Hagar in the Old Testament. I mean, have you guys ever felt like you guys are forgotten, or you feel like you're going through life alone? Say, no, God sees you. Jehovah Roy, he is your shepherd. You guys ever feel like you don't know what you're doing or where you're headed, or the future seems so uncertain? Say, no, I'm with you. I'm your shepherd. Jehovah Nisi, God is my banner. And he's saying the banner represents deliverance and salvation that God has fought for you, and he's given you that already. See, knowing who you have a relationship with changes everything. It gives you confidence. It gives you peace, and it gives you a calm. You know, my daughter these days, she does the cutest things. I wonder if, sometimes I wonder if children see more spiritual things. Because she's always coming to me and saying, like, there's a monster. And I'm like, it's no monster. Come on. Sometimes she runs and she's all scared about something. And then another part of me is like, she's saying something I don't see. Like, what's going on? Like, I gotta start praying over my house. Like, more crosses everywhere or something. But but something she does this pretty often. And one time she came up to me and I started to do something. I was like, she came to like, I'm scared, and she jumps on my lap and I was like, yo, look at me. And I go like this. You'll feel that. I was like, no monster can beat this. And it's funny because at that moment she was like, so you can beat up monsters? I was like, of course. And then she starts curling up on me like more confident, like. And I would say this for a while, but I started to change what I said because she still says it, and I'm like, I told you don't have to be scared. You don't have to be scared. But I realized I was like Sophie, like it's not me really, but you have a God who is stronger, who is by your side all the time. He's never going to leave you. No one's going to ever mess with you if you're his child. I'm not sure if she gets it, right? I don't know if she gets that there's God with her, but she certainly knows what it means to have a father. The most important name that I haven't put on this list, it should be number one, and maybe it covers them all. It's one that a whole New Testament has been written about. One of the names of God that we must never forget is Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ. He's the Son of God, and that means so much. When we call him the Son of God, that means he's a guy that made us sons and daughters of God. That relationship he offers to us, not only in prayer, but with his blood and his sacrifice on the cross. When Christ was first brought into this world, in Christmas, we always sing, Emmanuel, or, some songs like that, but it means God's with us. That means Jesus Christ is the link to everything that we've talked about with God, his almightiness, all the names of God, but he makes that personal. He makes that personal. Many people like to talk about God, but they don't like to name his name. We love talking about prayer, but we certainly don't want to say Jesus Christ. But guys, that's the only thing that matters. You know, John 14:6-7, it says this. And Jesus said to him, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And if you had known me, you would have known my Father also. From now on, you do know him and have seen him. Because you have seen me. Seen me. The key to it all. I want to ask you guys, is Christ real in your heart? I want to say, is Jesus Christ your Lord and Savior? Have you been adopted into the family of Christ through him? You know, when we say we're in him, in Christ, in whatever he's done, that means we're in him, and now we become sons and daughters of Christ in him. You haven't been done. Let's pray before we go into communion. Dear Dad, I know it's so hard to even say it like that. Lord, God, Father, we've been so accustomed to seeing you as so far away. A God that's almighty, but not really personal. And maybe even personal, but we don't really know what it means to have a father, or we don't know what that looks like in a perfect sense, at least. But Lord, we just want to thank you, Father. We just want to thank you for sending your Son, Jesus Christ, to die for us, that we may be adopted into your family. And Father, may you give us the confidence that comes from knowing who we are in you. And may we approach your throne, may we approach your house, may we come into your presence with that confidence, knowing that it's who we are, not what we do, that brings us into your presence, that makes us real, and makes our relationship real. And Lord, with that, may we never forget who you are. That you are a Father that is almighty, a Father that sees us, a Father that provides, a Father that has come through your Son, Jesus Christ, to redeem our hearts, to bring us closer to you. Lord, may we never forget. Father, may we never forget. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.